I asked ChatGPT if it could teach me music theory, and I was actually both impressed and a little confused by some of its choices. Now, if you're not sure what ChatGPT is, it's an extremely popular AI program designed to interact with the user in a conversational way. So, if you were to ask it something like to teach you music theory, it should gather a collection of resources and information and then present it to you in a way that's easily digestible. It replied back with, "Yes, I'd be happy to help you learn music theory. Music theory is the study of the principles and practices of music, including the understanding of musical notation, harmony, rhythm, melody, and form. While it can be a complex and multifaceted subject, I'll do my best to break it down into easily digestible parts." Right away, ChatGPT is letting us know that it's going to break this down into smaller, basic chunks. First, it's important to understand the basics of music notation. Musical notation is the written language of music and consists of symbols and signs that represent specific pitches, rhythms, and other musical elements. The basic elements of musical notation include pitch, the highness or lowness of a sound. In music notation, pitch is represented by placing a note on a specific line or space on the staff. Number 2, rhythm, the pattern of sounds and silences in a piece of music. Rhythm is represented by different note values such as whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, and 16th notes. Tempo, the speed at which a piece of music is played. Tempo is indicated by a specific marking such as allegro, fast, or lento, slow. Number 4, dynamics, the volume or intensity of a sound. Dynamics are indicated by specific markings such as PP, pianissimo or very soft, or FF, fortissimo or very loud. And number 5, harmony, the combination of 2 or more pitches played simultaneously. Harmony is represented by chord symbols and progressions. And then it's going to go on to give us some examples of more advanced theory topics, although I don't necessarily consider these advanced. Once you have a basic understanding of musical notation, you can start to explore more advanced topics in music theories such as scales and modes, the building blocks of melody. Scales are sets of pitches that are organized in ascending or descending order, while modes are variation of scales that emphasize different notes. Number 2, chords and chord progressions, the building blocks of harmony. Chords are groups of pitches played simultaneously, while chord progressions are sequences of chords that create a sense of tension and release. Number 3, musical form, the structure and organization of a piece of music. Musical form includes elements such as repetition, variation, contrast, and development. And then number 4, counterpoint, the art of combining melodies to create complex and interesting harmonies. Counterpoint involves the simultaneous combination of 2 or more independent melodic lines. So just with my initial question, ChatGPT breaks down 5 elements of musical notation and 4 elements of slightly more advanced topics. And it's probably important to notice that these examples provided are very conversational, so I don't necessarily think it's teaching rather than just presenting information. And then it ends by saying, these are just a few of the many topics that are covered in music theory. To learn more, I recommend starting with a basic music theory textbook or taking an online course in music theory. With practice and dedication, you can develop a deep understanding and appreciation of the principles and practices of music. I actually really like that it acknowledges that these are just a few of the main topics of music theory, but it also recommends picking up a textbook, taking a music theory course. There's only so much that you can learn in this conversational format, so I think that you can get that deeper appreciation and understanding with hands-on examples. And then at the very end, it renames our chat Music Theory Basics. Now, if you do want to learn the basics of maybe writing your own music for different genres of film and television, then I want to give you my free film composer recipe book. This is a downloadable PDF that's going to go over the basics of writing for action and horror and fantasy by breaking down each genre into the 4 main ingredients of music: melody, harmony, rhythm, and orchestration. So if you are interested, I left a link for that in the description down below. All right, so I thought that ChatGPT gave us a good start, but if someone with zero theory knowledge was trying to learn from ChatGPT, then I think we need to get a little bit more specific. So I asked it to explain these elements in a bit more detail, starting with pitch. Sure, I'd be happy to explain pitch in more detail. Pitch is the highness or lowness of a sound, and it's determined by the frequency of the sound wave. A sound wave is a pattern of air pressure changes that travels through the air and is detected by the human ear. The frequency of a sound wave is the number of complete cycles of air pressure changes that occur in 1 second and is measured in hertz. In Western music, we typically use a system of 12 pitches that repeat in octaves. This system is based on the 12-tone equal temperament system, which divides the octave into 12 equal parts. Each pitch is given a letter name from A to G, and there are sharps and flats that raise or lower the pitch by a half step. For example, A sharp is higher than A, and A flat is lower than A. The pitches are arranged on a musical staff, which is a set of 5 horizontal lines in 4 spaces. The lines and spaces are numbered from bottom to top, with the lowest line being line 1 and the highest space being space 4. The pitch of a note is determined by its position on the staff. A note on a higher line or space represents a higher pitch, while a note on a lower line or space represents a lower pitch. In addition to letter names and staff notation, there are also other ways to represent pitch, such as solfege, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and then back to do, scale degrees 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and frequency in hertz. These systems all represent the same set of pitches, but they use different symbols or names to do so. Pitch is a fundamental element of music, and understanding how it works is essential for any musician or music student. With practice and study, you can learn to recognize and identify different pitches and use them to create melodies, harmonies, and other musical elements. So I thought that was a great breakdown of pitch. It included the staff, it included solfege and scale degrees, so let's move on. I then asked ChatGPT to explain rhythm some more. Absolutely, rhythm is the pattern of sounds and silences in a piece of music, and it is a fundamental element of music that gives it a sense of motion and flow. There are several components of rhythm that are important to understand. Number 1, beat. The beat is the underlying pulse of the music, and it is what we typically tap our foot or nod our head to when listening to a piece of music. The beat is usually consistent throughout a piece of music and is indicated by a regular pattern of strong and weak beats. Number 2, meter. Meter is the organization of beats into groups, and it's indicated by a time signature at the beginning of a piece of music. The time signature consists of 2 numbers, with the top number indicating the number of beats per measure, and the bottom number indicating the note value that receives 1 beat. Number 3, tempo. Tempo refers to the speed at which the music is played, and it is usually indicated by a specific term such as andante, moderate speed, or allegro, fast. The tempo can also be indicated by a specific metronome marking, which gives a precise number of beats per minute. Number 4, note values. Note values indicate the duration of a note, and they are represented by different types of notes and rests. The most common note values include whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, and 16th notes. And then number 5, rests. Rests indicate a period of silence in the music, and they're represented by different symbols that correspond to different note values. To understand rhythm, it is important to develop a strong sense of internal pulse and be able to read and play rhythms accurately. This can be done through practice with a metronome or a drum machine, as well as through playing with other musicians and listening to a wide variety of music. With practice and study, you can develop a deep understanding and appreciation of the rhythmic elements of music, and use them to create compelling and expressive musical performances. I love that this is explaining in much more detail, and it's also offering ways for us to practice, like the metronome, the drum machine. But again, this is a conversational format, so what we're really lacking is that visual representation. So I asked it to explain dynamics some more. Certainly, dynamics refer to the varying levels of loudness and softness in a piece of music. Understanding dynamics is important because it allows musicians to create a sense of contrast and expressiveness in their playing, and to communicate the emotional content of the music to the listener. There are several terms that are commonly used to indicate different levels of dynamics. Piano, P. This term indicates that the music should be played softly. Mezzo piano. This term indicates a medium to soft dynamic level. Forte indicates that the music should be played loudly. Mezzo forte. This term indicates a medium to loud dynamic level. And then fortissimo, which indicates that the music should be played very loudly. I do have a problem with the order it presented the dynamics in. Honestly, forte and mezzo forte should probably be switched because mezzo forte is slightly softer than forte. In addition to these basic dynamic levels, there are also many other terms that can be used to indicate more specific changes in dynamics, such as crescendo, which is gradually getting louder, or diminuendo, which is gradually getting softer. Understanding dynamics is important because it allows musicians to create a sense of tension and release in their playing, and to convey the emotional content of the music to the listener. For example, a sudden change from a soft dynamic level to a loud one can create a sense of excitement or intensity, while a gradual decrease in dynamics dynamics can create a sense of calm or introspection. To practice dynamics, it can be helpful to work on controlling the volume of your playing and to be aware of the different levels of dynamics indicated in the music. Next, I wanted to see if it could explain the differences between scales and modes and why they were important. Scales and modes are both fundamental concepts in music theory. They are related but distinct concepts. Understanding the difference between scales and modes is important for musicians because they provide a basic framework for understanding how melody and harmony are constructed, and they can be used to create a wide variety of musical compositions. A scale is a series of notes arranged in a specific pattern of intervals. The most common type of scale in Western music is the major scale, which is made up of 7 notes arranged in a specific pattern of whole and half steps. Other common types of scales include the minor scale, the pentatonic scale, and the blues scale. Scales are used in music to create melodies, harmonies, and chord progressions, and they are essential tools for composing, improvising, and analyzing music. A mode, on the other hand, is a specific type of scale that is derived from the same note as a parent scale, but with a different starting note or tonic. For example, the major scale has 7 modes, each of which starts on a different note and has a unique set of intervals. The most common of these modes is the Ionian mode, which is simply another name for the major scale. Other common modes include the Dorian mode, the Phrygian mode, and the Mixolydian mode. Modes are important in music because they provide a way to create different moods and tonalities within a single key or scale. For example, the Dorian mode has a distinctive minor sound that is often used in jazz and rock music, while Mixolydian mode has a bluesy, soulful sound that is often used in blues and rock music as well. By using different modes, musicians can create a wide variety of musical compositions and styles and can add nuance and complexity to their playing. To practice using scales and modes, it can be helpful to work on playing them on your instrument or singing them, and to explore different ways of combining them to create melodies and harmonies. It can also be helpful to analyze the music of other composers and to identify the scales and modes that they are using, as this can provide insight into how different musical compositions are constructed. So now I wanted to see if ChatGPT could write a simple counterpoint line, and it kind of does. It said, sure, here's a simple counterpoint line in C major. This counterpoint line is a simple melody that is played simultaneously with another melody, creating 2 independent lines of music that harmonize with each other. The first melody moves up the C major scale, while the second melody moves down the scale, creating a pleasing harmonic tension and release as the 2 melodies interweave. This is just one example of counterpoint, and there are many different techniques and approaches that can be used to create more complex and sophisticated counterpoint lines. And since I'm reading from this little box and not an actual piece of music, I'm assuming that each note is rhythmically in line with one another, which would make this closest to first species counterpoint. However, if you want to get real technical, most textbooks are probably going to tell you to start with a perfect unison, a perfect fifth, or an octave. This G to C is a perfect fourth. But the overall concept I think it's trying to convey is that 2 lines are working together and harmonizing with one another. What I do want to point out is that it does mention that there are different techniques to create more complex counterpoint lines. This would probably be the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th species counterpoint. So then I tried to get ChatGPT to add a little bit more rhythmic variation, and I probably should have specified exactly what I was looking for. It said, sure, here's an example of a simple counterpoint line in C major with added rhythmic variation. In this example, the first melody still moves up the C major scale, but the rhythm has been varied by repeating the first note several times before continuing up the scale. The second melody also still moves down the scale, but the rhythm has been varied by adding an extra quarter note at the end of each phrase. These variations create a more interesting and dynamic counterpoint line and add a sense of rhythmic tension and release to the harmonies. There are many different ways to vary the rhythm of a counterpoint line, and experimenting with different rhythmic patterns and techniques can lead to even more complex and satisfying musical compositions. It said that it varied the rhythm by adding more quarter notes, but I was specifically looking for a variation of different note values. So quarter notes, whole notes, half notes, eighth notes. But what it really comes down to is that it varied the harmony. It also repeats 2 dissonant intervals back to back, the 7th with the D to C, and the ninth with the C to D. Again, if you're strictly following a textbook, it'll likely tell you that you can only use consonant intervals like thirds and fifths and sixths, so those two dissonant intervals would not follow counterpoint rules. But the thing is, without that prior counterpoint knowledge, you wouldn't know what to question from ChatGPT. This is a perfect example of not knowing what you don't know until you know it, and that ChatGPT doesn't get everything right. Then I wanted to see if it could write a unique melody using the Locrian mode, and this is what it gave me. Sure, here's an example of a unique melody in the Locrian mode. In the Locrian mode, the tonic note is a flattened 7th degree of the major scale, which creates a unique and somewhat dissonant sound. This melody starts on the tonic note of A and moves up the Locrian scale, with each note emphasizing the characteristic flattened 7th scale degree. I have a feeling it's starting to stumble over itself, because that doesn't really make too much sense, but let's keep going. The second melody line starts on the flattened 7th degree of the scale and moves down, creating a counterpoint that resolves the dissonance and provides a satisfying conclusion. No. Of course, there are many different ways to use the Locrian mode in melody writing, and this is just one example of how it can be used to create a distinctive and memorable musical composition. Okay, so the Locrian scale actually just starts on the 7th scale degree of a major scale. So if we were in C major, the mode would be B Locrian. It's not that the 7th scale degree is flattened, it's just we're starting on the 7th degree, and I think that's what confused ChatGPT. If we look at the example that it created, I don't even really know what's going on. I don't really know why it chose to start on A. That would make this A Locrian, which would follow like the B flat major scale. So if we are sticking to that and we are in A Locrian, then that A flat should not be anywhere in there. But what's really confusing is that it says the second melody creates a counterpoint. And we know that a counterpoint is two lines coming together to create some sort of harmony, right? So is this implying that the two lines should be played at once? If that's the case, you get the dissonance between the A and the A flat, the D and the E flat, and then the E flat and the D. Really, that means ChatGPT strayed far away from what I was asking for. Okay, so there's clearly a lot to fix, but when I told it that there wasn't an A flat in what seemed to be an A Locrian scale, it corrected itself with accurate intervals and then added more A flats. You are correct, and I apologize for the mistake in my previous response. The Locrian mode of A starts on A and follows the pattern of intervals A, B flat, C, D, E flat, F, G, and A. Here's a new example of a unique melody in A Locrian. We get our A flats, and again, this melody is not unique because it now just goes up the scale. This melody uses the characteristic flattened 5th and 7th degrees of the Locrian mode to create a unique and somewhat mysterious sound. The first melody line starts on A and moves up the Locrian scale, with each note emphasizing the flattened 5th and 7th degrees of the scale. The second melody line starts on the flattened 7th degree and moves up to the tonic, creating a counterpoint that resolves the dissonance and provides a satisfying conclusion. That is the opposite of a satisfying conclusion, but maybe that's just me. This is just one example of how the Locrian mode can be used to create a distinctive and evocative melody. Now, I think that ChatGPT is far from fully teaching us music theory or really any other topic. Once we started getting more specific and asked for more detail, we saw how it struggled and grew more inaccurate. And I think that kind of defeats the purpose of an absolute beginner trying to learn music theory. But I also do want to give it some credit because judging from the first few prompts, ChatGPT has a lot of potential. And right now I see it as a great resource for outlines and bullet points. And I thought that it broke down the basics beautifully. The thing is, right now it's going to be on us to double check its answers. But ChatGPT did say that it recommends picking up a music theory textbook, taking some online classes, so it knows that this is not the definitive way of learning right now. I know it's 2023, but I think it's pretty crazy that we have access to these AI tools. There's of course ChatGPT, there's the new Bing, and more just keep popping up. So I think for better or for worse, these AI chatbots are probably going to be sticking around for a while. So let me know in the comments down below, what do you think of AI being involved in music? Do you think there's room for it to grow, or do you think there's no room for it at all? And if you do want a way to make writing your music easier, then check out my Hollywood Orchestrator video next. I'll see you over there, and as always, happy composing.